Hey, shalom, shalom, shalom. I want to first start off by giving infinite praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashim, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashim and Kakwadash. Double honors to my apostles and elders, a great millstone that rule well, and peace and salutations to the elect men preaching not this word of truth and sincerity. This is the brother Yakanam from the DC Church, and the topic I wanted to touch on today, and Lord's will, this video is entitled "The Biggest Enemy is Doubt." You know, and a few things, made me, ponder upon, this specific topic. And one of those things is being, one of those things being that the easiest way to root yourself out and weaken yourself in the spirit is to have that spirit of doubt, which is ultimately a demon. Having a doubtful spirit is a demonic possession that you have to cut off and you have to get rid of. And it's something that can strike at any which moment to when you have a moment of weakness. A certain event could happen. A certain event could happen to make you feel that way, or just having patience upon the Lord can having patience that isn't built upon faith, can weaken your resolve, and ultimately, the biggest enemy, isn't really Esau, isn't, his armies and the things that he has set for us, because we already know what the end of it is, we already know what the answer to all those things are, right? We have the answer, but it's about being able to, being able to keeping your faith through it all and cutting off that fearful spirit, or cutting off that doubtful spirit that may come upon you, which could act as, sudden fear, which the Lord tells us not to have. It could be something to where something specific happens in your life to where you feel like giving up, because events and certain things could happen in your life to where you feel as if this current life isn't worth living, and there's no point in having hope because nothing favorable happened, because life didn't favor life, or what you wanted to favor you didn't happen specifically, and, I'm just, this is just a video of exhortation, and a video video that I hope is, edifying in the sense of that, in the sense of knowing what our biggest enemy is, and it's ultimately ourselves. There's no trial or tribulation, there's no trial or tribulation that can overtake us if we keep the faith, and keep 100% faith in Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahweh Shai. But the only way to know that is also knowing that the biggest enemy that we have to ourselves is ourselves. Is the things that we mentally put in ourselves to doubt, ultimately Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahweh Shai. Because you could say that you've given up on yourself, honestly, but you got to remember what you represent. If you're a representation of Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahweh Shai, and you believe that you come in the spirit of Yahweh Shai, then you can't give up on yourself. If you give up on yourself, you're ultimately giving up on Yahweh Shai, because you believe that there's something that he can't deliver you up out of. You believe that there's something that he can't restore onto you, and no matter how you feel in whatever situation that you're going through, Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahweh Shai is a Lord of restoration. Yahweh Shai was given unto us so he can deliver us, and our Lord and our power is a power of restoration. And there's multiple examples of that throughout the scriptures. But the only way that he can give you that restoration is if you cut off that spirit of doubt, which is ultimately the biggest enemy that we have being in this ministry, is having that doubtful spirit. Because no matter what you go through, and no matter what you did in the past, as long as you don't condemn yourself, you have hope in salvation. you know. Now I'm gonna start off by getting 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 7. It says, for the Lord have not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and love and of a sound mind. You know, and these things only come once you cut off that fear of what certain things can happen in the world, right? So you can only really have, you know, power, love, and a sound mind if you let go of that fear, right? And it's ultimate, and it doesn't have to be fear in terms of what can happen to you physically, like, you know, you know, terms of fear of your life being taken away at any specific moment. The fear could ultimately be that what's it called? It could be the opportunities that you may have lost. It may be the life that you ideally wanted to have within a certain time period. It could be things that you wanted to go your way, you know, and you're fearful of being fearful of losing it, you know, being in this ministry, you know, and you're fearful of your patience being what's it called? Your patience being a crutch against the life that you ultimately want. You know, fear comes in different forms, and it doesn't always have to be a fear of what you're, it doesn't ultimately have to be a fear of, you know, fear of death specifically. Fear can come in different shapes, size, and aspects. You could be fearful for what you're going to miss out on. You know, you could be fearful for what happens if you don't do what's it called? What you don't if you don't do something specifically. You know, that may contradict what you need to be doing in the spirit. You know, fear comes in so many different so many different forms. You know, but he didn't give us a spirit of fear. You know, he gave us a spirit of power and of love and a sound mind, and those things are things that can't be replaced. You know, no matter what you're doing, no matter what you do in life, if you don't have that power that comes from the Lord, that love that is in the Lord, and that you exude through the love of Yahweh Hashem Yahushua, you know, and that sound mind, which is one of the most important things, because having a sound mind is having a mind of faith. You know, a sound mind is not a mind that wavers. It's not a mind that's grown weak. You know, it's a mind that's made strong through faith. You know, the scriptures talk about give me any plague but a plague of the heart. Ultimately, it's talking about give me any plague but a plague of the mind. If you have a doubtful mindset, that is worse than having a physical ailment. That's how serious this thing is. Having a physical ailment is better than having a plague of the heart, meaning having a mind that's not sound and not of the faith of Yahweh Hashem Yahushua. So when you think about it from that perspective, our biggest enemy is the doubt that we put that we can put upon ourselves, and that ultimately is a demon that we have to cast out. You know. And we're in the flesh, so we have to work on casting out that demon constantly, you know, because we don't wake up at 100% every single day. We'd be naive to think that, but it's about having the faith to know that you can cast out these demons by staying in the spirit, you know, by renewing your faith day in and day out. Every day we're renewing our mind and renewing our faith and growing our faith, right? You know, what's it called? We had a word of the week, which was growth. Well, if you're stagnant, you're not going to be able to. If you're stagnant and you're not growing, you're not learning from the things that you've gone through, and you're not putting the effort to build up your knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and building up your faith. Well, ultimately, that same faith that you had before isn't going to be enough. You know, you have to multiply that faith. You know, Yahweh Hashem Yahushua is a Lord of multiplication. He's a Lord of growth. You know, you have to add on to what he's given you, you know, in the spirit. And that's what keeps you from having that doubt seep in, because the trials and tribulations and the demons that are going to be put upon you with the faith that you have, with the current faith that you have, is, with the current faith that you have, it's going to keep on trying you, But it's about being able to overcome those things and overcome stronger demons, through the Spirit. Now, this is Romans chapter 14, verse 22. Is that has thou faith? Have it to thyself before God. Happy is he that condemneth not himself in that thing which he alloweth. Right? So hold on. Yeah. Some notifications don't go off. Let me read it again. This is Romans chapter 14, verse 22. It says, hast thou faith? Have it to thyself before Yahweh Shem Yahushai. Right? So if you have faith, have it before Yahweh Shem Yahushai. That's the only power that we should really be having faith in. Is Yahweh Shem Yahushai, point blank, period. Happy is he that condemneth not himself in the thing which he alloweth. So happy are you, glad of you, of a sound mind are you, if you condemn not yourself, right? So we're not supposed to condemn ourselves. No matter what we go through, no matter how long we've been waiting upon the Lord, we're not supposed to condemn ourselves and tell ourselves that, man, I'm not a man of the Lord. The Lord is not dealing with me. The Lord is not dealing with me. Nothing. The Lord has abandoned me. The Lord has forsaken me because the X, Y, and Z hasn't happened. We shouldn't have that spirit of self-condemnation, basically telling ourselves that we aren't favored by Yahweh Shem Yahushai. Because we're always going to be tried. Something is always going to happen, and Yahweh Shem Yahushai is always. Yahweh Shem Yahushai is preparing the kingdom for us, and we're supposed to believe that. So no matter how long we have to wait, no matter what event happens in our life, we're not supposed to have that mindset of the Lord is not dealing with me. The Lord is not dealing with me. The Lord is this. The Lord hasn't given me the spirit to be able to overcome the things that he set forth. Because the scriptures talk about say that Yahweh Shem Yahushai is not impeded to us things that we can't overcome. So everything that Yahweh Shem Yahushai set forth before you, you're able to overcome. But it's all about having faith in him and keeping a sound mind while you're going through it. Because it's not about what you go through, it's about how you go through it. It's about the mindset that you have when you're going through it. And it's easier said than done. I will say that. It's easier said than done. It's not easy. But ultimately, it's the answer. It's the answer to be able to get through any problem that you have in this world. It's having a sound mind and having the mind to where you're able to keep hope in Yahweh Shem Yahushai. Because without hope, we have nothing. Because we don't have physical might in this world. We don't have physical might in this world. We can't enact what we really want, in terms of living life. We can't exact it. We can't exact it. We can't give ourselves eternal life. We can't give ourselves, we can't give ourselves a kingdom. It's only through Yahweh Shem Yahushai. And having a spirit to where we condemn ourselves and basically giving up. You ultimately, what? Let me ask this: what else are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to be in captivity? Are we supposed to be in captivity for generations upon generations? And just feel as if anything is anything. That's not an answer. Because ultimately, what people want is solutions. What people want is answers. Ultimately. Even if you do have that doubtful mind, even if you do have that condemnation, you want answers. And the only answer is having faith in Yahweh Shem Yahushai. That's the only answer. That's the only thing that's worked for any Israelite. Ultimately, in the end, that's the only thing that's worked for generations upon generations of Israelites is having faith in Yahweh Shem Yahushai. because everything else withers away. Everything else is temporal. But the faith in Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai and the rewards that he gives you for that faith is eternal. Now it says, happy is he that condemneth not himself in the thing which he alloweth. And he that doubted is damned if he eat. So if you doubt and you condemn yourself, you're damned. There's nothing for you. You know, there's nothing for you. There's nothing that Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai can give a man that already damned himself, that already condemned himself. Right? Damned if he eat, because he eateth not of faith. For whatsoever is not of faith is a sin. So if you've lost the faith, whatever is of your life afterwards is sin, because that's ultimately what it leads to. Lack of faith leads to sin. You know, if faith is not your anchor, if faith is not your anchor going through this life that we live in, then ultimately the only thing that can really lead to is sin. And the reason why it leads to sin is because we're in the flesh. We're in the flesh. You know, and the thing is that everybody sins, but it's about who is going to be forgiven of their sins. And that's one thing that we have to keep in mind. It's not about who sins, it's about who gets forgiven of his sins. And the only men, women, and children that are able to get forgiven of their sins is those under the covering of Yahweh Shai and Mashiach. And the only ones that are under that covering are the ones that have faith, and the ones that didn't lose hope, the ones that didn't condemn themselves. You know, the ones that endured into the end, and that didn't waver when temptation struck. You know, now this is Sirach chapter 14, verse 2. It says, blessed is he whose conscience have not condemned him, and who hasn't fallen from the hope in the Lord. So if you're blessed if your conscience haven't condemned you. And this is why the video is entitled, Doubt is the Biggest Enemy. You know, because in order to condemn yourself in your conscience, you have to have a doubtful spirit. You know, and that's a spirit that we have that you have to, that's a spirit and a demon that you have to cut off whenever it strikes. You can't be blessed. You can't be blessed if you don't have hope. You can't be blessed if you don't have faith. The only men that are going to be able to be given that salvation is the men that have faith. You know, and you know, it could sound like a broken record to those that, you know, those that don't deep a little digger, but you have to talk about the faith repetitiously, because that's the only thing that's keeping us in this thing. You know, that's ultimately the things that keep us in this thing. One of the things that the elders always said is that is really going to be the milk that that's going to deliver you in those days, and that's the foundational stuff, such as the exhortation about faith and keeping the faith. You know, this is what boosts morale within the fight that we're fighting, because we are fighting a fight, but we're fighting a spiritual fight. The fight that we're fighting is not carnal. It's all spiritual. This is spiritual warfare on the highest level. And the only way to be able to make any sort of progress, and have any sort of victory, you know, in the end, is winning these little battles through faith. Because we're fighting a battle every single day, right? And the war is only won after the war is only won if you're able to keep your faith in the very end. But these battles that we're going through, you know, through the Spirit, is meant to boost our morale. It's meant to give us wins and give us confidence in Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai. Because before David defeated Goliath, he referenced the battles that he was able to win before. You know, and that's representative of the battles that we have won in the Spirit before. when that ultimate test comes. He mentioned the Lord's deliverance from all those different things. And we have to reference the Lord's deliverance from all the things that we've went through. And it only really means something if we keep the faith when we meet the ultimate trial. Now, this is Matthew chapter 21, verse 21. It says, Yahushua answered and said unto them, Verily I say unto you, if ye have little faith and doubt not, ye shall not only do this which have done to the fig tree, but also ye shall say unto this mountain, Thou be removed, and thou cast into the sea, and it shall be done. And all things whatsoever ye shall ask in prayer, believing, ye shall receive. So it's all about having faith, no matter how big or how little you have. As long as you have faith, you're able to do extraordinary things, and you're gonna be able to receive that spiritual power which the Lord has impeded to them, impeded to the men that do have faith, and that's gonna be manifest when the Lord sees fit. But the spiritual power that we have right now is the power to fight and ward off these demons that come upon us every single day. That is a form of spiritual power, to be able to cast out demons. And that's exactly what we're doing every single day. Every day that we keep the faith, every day that we stay in the spirit is a day that we've shown our spiritual power. And one of the biggest ones is to be able to cast out those demons and being able to stay in the spirit. Those are wins within itself. Now, we'll read Matthew chapter 14, verse 27. And it says, it says, but straightway Yahushua spoke unto them, saying, Be of good cheer. It is I. Be not afraid. And Peter answered unto him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me to come unto thee on the water. You know, this is a story of Yahushua walking on water. And he said, Come. And when Peter was down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go unto Yahushua. But then he saw the wind boisterous, and he was afraid. You know, and that's the thing. We're spiritually walking on that water right now. We're walking on the water. We could be in this, and that water is representative of this world that we're supposed to overcome, right? But if we're seeing these things, if we're seeing X, Y, and Z happening, it's not. We're supposed to be able to brush it off. We're supposed to be able to keep our faith. You know, and that's why the scriptures talk about not letting sudden fear take hold of us. And it also talks about enduring. You know, and it talks about overcoming this world, right? Because the world it's not going to be easy. We're going to see things which we never thought was believable. You know, that wind is speaking about, you know, it was probably the worst, of the worst kind that Peter's ever saw. Right? It could have made any man's heart fearful. But the point is to being able to keep the faith, to be able to see these things and being able to overcome it through the faith in Yahweh Hashem Yahushua, right? And it says, And it says, but when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid and beginning to sink. You know, and that's the thing. You only begin to sink when you doubt, because he feared what that storm was going to do unto him, right? You only start to sink when you fear, when you lose hope in the Lord's protection and the Lord's in the Lord's provision. You have to believe that whatever you see coming ahead of you, Yahweh Hashem Yahushua is going to take care of his elect. And another thing that you have to do and keep this mind in you is that you are one of the elect. You know, you have to have that mind within you. You have to have that confidence in Yahweh Hashem Yahushua. Everything else that come afterwards, that is his will. But as for right now, as you're in the spirit, you have to believe that Yahweh Bashem Yahushua is chosen. You have to have confidence. You have to have confidence in that, you know, because you're a representation of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua so long as you keep the faith. Continuing on, it says, and immediately Yahushua stretched forth his hand and caught him and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? It said, Yahushua said, why did you doubt? You know, because at the end of the day, the Lord is going to provide. The Lord is going to protect. The Lord is going to deliver. You know, Yahushua's name is that he delivers. So why would you doubt? And that's why the biggest enemy is doubt, because if you doubt, you will sink and you will fall for the things that this world has set up to entrap you and to keep you from the love of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua. And when they were come into the ship, the wind ceased. So when Yahushua came forth and when they went into the ship, the wind ceased. You know, and that's explanatory. If you're with Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, there's nothing that he can't cast away. There's nothing that he can't overcome. There's nothing that he can't cause to wither away. You know, nothing is too dangerous in this. In the sight of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua. Nothing is above his power. Right? Now, this is the last scripture. It says, this is James chapter 1, verse 12. It says, blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. You know, and that's self-explanatory. We have to endure. You know, we have to be able to persevere. You know, we have to be able to overcome that spirit of doubt, you know, and that's promised to them that love him, because perfect love casteth away all fear and all doubt, you know, and that perfect love only comes through the faith in Yahweh Bashem Yahushua, which we're building up every single day, and which we're supposed to be growing every single day. You know, in order to withstand the wiles of the devil, in order to win this spiritual warfare that we're going through every single day, you know. And the biggest enemy that you're going to have through that walk and through that journey is yourself. You know, there's nothing that can keep us away from the love of Yahweh Bashem Yahushua if you keep the faith, you know. But the biggest enemy is that self-doubt, which you have to cast away. You know, no matter what you go through, no matter what event happens and transpires in your life, or whatever disappointment that you go through, that makes you feel that Yahweh Bashem Yahushua is not dealing with you, that Yahweh Bashem Yahushua is not protecting you, that Yahweh Bashem Yahushua is not providing for you. Sometimes you have to take a step back and ask yourself, what is this for? Why? What? And how and what can I learn from this? How can I build myself spiritually from this? And how can I stay, and how can I build upon my faith that I already have? You know, with that, I want to say, call Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushua. You know, double honor to my apostle. Know this is a great millstone that will well. And peace and salutations to the elect men pushing out this word in truth and sincerity. Till next time, I want to say shalom.